Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. And apparently, high-functioning codependency season is in full swing. So that's what's on my mind. And that's what you guys want to talk about, and I always want to talk about it, so that's why we're a good matching. So let's start with, do you think you are codependent, or are you unsure? Because in this episode of the Terri Cole Show, I'm actually going to walk you through the questions that you need to answer and consider to pretty conclusively understand if you are a high-functioning codependent. So that's basically what I'm walking you through in this episode. So if you happen to be new to my YouTube channel, hello and welcome. Please just introduce yourself in the comments. We are a very friendly group. Make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you get notified every time I roll out something new, which is every Tuesday. And thank you guys for being such an active group and so super supportive of each other. I really, really appreciate you. All right, let's bust it on into today's episode. Are you codependent? That is what we're hitting in this episode of the Terri Cole Show today. So I want you to walk away from this 20-minute episode with a clear snapshot of your own codependent behaviors. You know that I will put the questions in the guide for you. You can go to terricole.com/guide. So if you're driving or doing something else, I'm always thinking about how can I make it as easy as possible for you to change what isn't working in your life. Hence why I almost always do a downloadable guide for you with all the gems from the episode, just to make it as easy as possible for you to actually take action, because that is what just thrills me, is I want you to get what you want in this life, whatever that is. I do not purport to know what that is, but I know you don't want to be codependent, because that for sure gets in the way of you getting what you want in this life. So, number one, start with this question. Do you feel like your partner's needs are more important than yours? Now, keep in mind, you guys, you may not actively and consciously think this, but do you behave as if your partner's needs are more important than yours? Because a lot of times when we're sort of confronted with what does this action mean, we go, no, I don't think that. That's not true. But you have to actually look at the action. I knew someone back in the day who was in a really codependent relationship, and her whole life revolved around pleasing this boyfriend. And I just remember we were talking about, they were going on a road trip, like a really long road trip, like across the country road trip. And that the entire time they only listened to the music that he liked, and he was singing at the top of his lungs. So she got to be an audience for 4 days of his singing. And anytime she would be like, well, why don't we put something else on that's whatever? He didn't care. So again, that's behavior. If I had asked her back then, oh, do you prioritize Bob's needs or desires over your own? She wouldn't say yes, but her behavior said yes, because she didn't like conflict. So it's almost like, again, this is another place where compatibility and compliance get confused, where people feel like, well, we don't fight, so we're super compatible. And you're like, well, if you're being compliant to what the other person wants, right? What is compliance? It means we're giving in to what the other person wants. I'm going to not call that compatibility. I'm going to call that you managing the person and the situation so that there's no conflict. So, all right. I gotta keep moving, or we're never gonna get through these 9 questions. Number 2, is it hard for you to express your needs and preferences? And I can tell you from dealing with and being a high-functioning codependent all of my life until I got into recovery X number of years ago, that asking for what I needed, I was an expert at implying, at hinting, at being sarcastic, at all these long way around the barn, could never be direct about what I needed and wanted. So I wonder if that's true for you. And listen, answering these questions honestly, of course, is going to give you the most truthful snapshot of where you are right now around high-functioning codependency. So this is a no judgment zone. My whole entire channel, my podcast, my YouTube channel, all the things that I do are all no judgment zones, because if we get really judgy, we're not going to look at what we need to look at. If we let shame dictate what we look at, we won't want to look at it. We'll just stay in denial of it, but then nothing changes. And you deserve to create relationships and lives and careers that thrill and fulfill you. Again, long way around the barn. Getting to number 3. Do you give more in your relationship and receive less in return? Right? How much do you organize around what your partner wants? How much emotional labor are you doing? Is there a lack of mutuality? So that's a bunch of questions for number 3, but that's really what we're getting down to. Are you doing more of the work? If you're in a family system, are you the one who's the primary caregiver for the kids? Are you managing their school schedules? Are you managing the doctors? Do you make sure that there's food? Do you do all the things? Because it is super common for women to do all the things. This is not me shitting on men. I love men. This is not the way it is in my home. So I also know that there's lots of more evolved guys out there, or healthier relationships out there. But if you are identifying with being a high-functioning codependent, you may be doing more of the emotional labor than your partner. And listen, again, this is not vilifying your partner, because you guys, so much of the time, I can tell you in my young life, I was doing all the things because I was insisting on doing all the things. And then I was pissed that I was doing all the things. So sometimes people who are in relationships with people who are high-functioning codependents, they end up in what's called psychologically a double bind, where they can't win either way. If they do it, they'll probably do it wrong. If they don't do it, eventually the person doing all this stuff becomes resentful, which is why we have to be able to talk about what we need. We have to be able to talk about how to create equity in our relationships. When I talk about more mutuality, I'm talking about both people being considered in the relationship as opposed to just one. You know, it's interesting. I fell into this Instagram hole maybe it was Threads, because that's more of a talky place. And someone was like, "Wow, I've been on the wrong side of the internet for a while, where everyone hates their husbands, and complaining and saying all the bad things they do. Does anyone love their husbands? Is anyone happy?" And there were hundreds, probably thousands at this point, of super motivating shares about people in healthy relationships who are very happy. And I'm telling you right now, the main thing that I could see in hundreds, I was there for about an hour. I read so many, because from a psychological point of view, of course, I find it fascinating. But what the thread throughout was their partner actually taking care of them, so that how much it means when you're it was Christmas Day, I think I was looking at it, or whatever. And they were like, or Christmas Eve, and like, "Oh, my husband's making Christmas Eve dinner right now." Another person showed pictures of the husbands in the family. The women had done all the cooking. The husband's doing all the cleaning up. But there were so many more. So anyway, if you're looking for inspiration, people, about relationships, if you are maybe looking to get partnered, there really is hope. So there's lots of people out there in good relationships. But I have to say, we have to establish what a good relationship is. And when you're an HFC, what you establish is not a healthy relationship. It's more of a one-sided situation where you're managing the shit out of the other person and you're getting all the things done. But where are you in the mix? And it can be very difficult to ask for help, to accept help. Last week, I just did the HFC recovery, 12 things that you need to do if you want to be in recovery from being a high-functioning codependent. Or maybe that's next week. I don't know when they're coming out. But anyway, look for that, because one of the things there is about asking for and allowing help. And as much as I know you understand what I'm saying here, right? If you're doing more of the emotional labor, doing all the things, eventually you're going to be resentful as shit if you're not already. But we need to change our ability to receive in order to create more mutuality in our relationships. All right, number 4. Do you do things for the other person that they can and should do for themselves? Why do you think that is? Again, all of these questions are going to be in the guide for you, terricole.com/guide. A lot of times we just get into these rote routines where we just keep doing the same thing. And it's interesting. I was with my 9-year-old grandbaby twins for the last couple of days, and they were literally doing their own laundry. The two of them, they're twins, they spilled something on the bed that they were sleeping in, and they actually took the sheets off, washed them, and put them back on, like the bed themselves. I mean, the parents knew this was happening. And I was like, wow, I didn't know how to do that. Anyway, the point is allowing. It doesn't just work with kids. Other people adding value makes you feel masterful, makes you feel good about yourself, is good for self-esteem. So again, if you're doing things for your teenagers that they can and should be doing for themselves or anybody, and listen, some people will think 9 is too young to do your own laundry. That's fine. But you understand what the question is. There are things that you do for people that they can and should be doing for themselves, especially when they're things that make you resentful, that you feel like you have to do them. So that's really the key, is looking at why do you continue to do it? How much of your own identity is wrapped up in overfunctioning in your relationships? All right, number 5. Is it difficult to separate your feeling state and identity from your partner? Right? So let's look at it like, for example, if they're in a bad mood, even though you were just in a fine mood, do you feel responsible for shifting it, or for talking them out of it, or for being like, what do you have to be upset about, or controlling the way they're feeling? Right? It's almost like we only know ourselves when we're actively HFC, if you're in a relationship, in relation to someone else's reaction or response to us, which means we feel responsible for how they're feeling. And we feel responsible for making it better in some way. And that is so intimacy blocking. So I think that that's important, that we see what does it actually do to us in the relationship, and what does it do to them? Well, it blocks intimacy, because the moment we are fixing, rather than saying, tell me more about your mood. Did something happen? I'm here to listen. Do you need to vent? Like, there's a zillion other things you could say. But if you're just like, oh, let me make you your favorite drink and let's just skip to what we're eating for dinner, like let's just, gloss over it. That's not very loving, actually. Because when someone feels bad, talking about it is the more loving action to take. All right, 6th question. Are you afraid of rejection, abandonment, or conflict in your relationships? And this is all relationships, you guys. High-functioning codependency is not limited to romantic relationships, so we know that. So are you afraid of rejection, abandonment, or conflict in your relationships? And what past experiences might be driving that fear? So we will, there's one caveat I'll say, that as human beings, none of us are psyched to be rejected or abandoned. And most of us are not seeking conflict. Some people are, different mental health challenges, potentially, or personalities. But most of us, it's natural to be afraid of it, but do you avoid it at all costs? This is the difference between just being human, right? None of us love the idea of being abandoned, but do you abandon yourself to avoid rejection, abandonment, or conflict in your relationships? And what past experiences might be driving that fear? Again, this is going to be in the guide. So you may not know the answer to that right now, but it's just a point to ponder. Number 7. Do you rely on the validation of others to feel valuable or worthy? If you're not doing for others, how do you feel about yourself? Are you able to validate your own worth? This is really, really important. If you identify with this and feel like you cannot validate your own worth, it is so worth getting into recovery from being a high-functioning codependent, simply so you can validate your own worth. Because when we can't, it leaves us super vulnerable, a lot of times, to people who are emotionally untrustworthy. So we want to avoid that. When we know that we're inherently valuable, it makes it easier to disappoint others. It makes it easier to tolerate someone else not liking what we're doing. But if we believe that our worth is connected to our productivity, our worth is connected to, what we're doing for others, of us being of service to others, that is a never-ending treadmill of having to endlessly overgive to feel valuable. It is so exhausting and depressing. And when you get into recovery, you don't feel that way. You know you're inherently worthy. You can't just take my word for it, but I wish you could, because you are inherently worthy. Faux show. All right, number 8, is your communication effective, right? When there's an issue in your relationships, do you bring it up and assert your preferences, or do you avoid the conversation altogether? Because I find these two things go together. When people are actively high-functioning codependent, usually their communication skills are lacking in some way. That direct communication is something that they're just not good at. And that's especially, let me say especially when it comes to what you want, what you need, how you feel, right? You might be able to be super direct when it comes to your kids, when it comes to something else, but I'm talking about when it comes to you and your most tender heart. Can you tell the truth about how you feel in your closest relationships? Because a lot of times HFCs really can't. They just continually take one for the team, feel like I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. It's not a big deal. And, what happens is, you do that for decades and decades, and ultimately you end up really resentful and nobody knows you. So there's that, which is super depressing, to get to like your 6th or 7th decade of life and feel an existential aloneness, because you might be surrounded by people, but if you've never learned how to communicate how you really feel, those people may love a version of you they think they know, but they don't know you. And you are so friggin' worth knowing. Like, you really are so worth knowing. There's never been another you. DNA-wise, it's a fact. You are the only you who will ever exist on this planet. And you are inherently worthy right now. All right, number 9. Do you feel like you cannot live without your partner? Is it impossible for you to imagine a life without them? Because again, a lot of times with high-functioning codependency, our identity is like merging with the other person. We're more identified as a couple than we are as an individual. And to be healthy, listen, we have to just grasp the reality that we come into this life alone and we go out of this life alone. Not in some depressing way. I don't mean that as sadness. It's the truth, which is why the most important relationship that you will ever build in your entire life is your relationship with yourself. And when you're a high-functioning codependent, you have not built an authentic relationship with self, because there's too much reacting and responding and anticipating and a hypervigilance and fear to even take the time or the luxury or the bandwidth to create this relationship with yourself. So I would love to hear from you. Are you still actively high-functioning codependent? If this resonated with you, if you're like, oh my gosh, here's me raising my hand, check out my brand new course, Breaking the Cycle of High-Functioning Codependency. So it's a 6-week therapeutically informed journey to stop overfunctioning and all the things I just mentioned, and really finally come home to yourself. Because it is so empowering when you can make all the decisions in your life from that place of being at home in your own body, in your own mind. So all you need to do to enroll is go to terricole.com/cycle breaker, and I will put this in the show notes, of course. Let me know if this episode on high-functioning codependency resonated with you. Did it help you? If it did, please share it with the people in your life. I hope you have the most amazing week. I would love to see you in Breaking the Cycle of High-Functioning Codependency. So if it sounds interesting, go check it out. terricole.com/cycle breaker. And as always, take care of you.